Right-wing justices appear ready to eviscerate affirmative action in college admissions. American Muslims in the midterms aren't long-shot candidates anymore. Taliban approves restoration of historic synagogue in western Afghanistan. 25 houses demolished in Delhi's Muslim locality. Iran detains rapper Salehi over support for anti-government protests. Kashmiri man writes Quran by hand on a single piece of paper. From Chicago studios, this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Samana Siddiqui. Our top story tonight. On Monday, the U.S. Supreme Court's far-right supermajority seemed open to rolling back decades of race-conscious admissions decisions in colleges and universities. The cases in consideration are Students for Fair Admissions versus President and Fellows of Harvard and Students for Fair Admissions versus University of North Carolina. Slate Magazine's senior writer Mark Joseph Stern contends the cases were manufactured to abolish affirmative action in higher education. He argued that all 6 conservative justices are poised to declare that colleges' consideration of race violates the Constitution's Equal Protection Clause and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The latter applies equal protection standards to private institutions, he adds. In related news about the Supreme Court, a petition filed Friday with the court is asking for a review of the constitutionality of a provision in Mississippi's Constitution that bans felons from voting. Plaintiffs Roy Harness and Kamal Kareem filed the lawsuit to challenge the provision. They claim Section 241 from the 1890 Constitution is still tainted by the racial animus with which they were originally enacted. Harness and Kareem were convicted of forgery and embezzlement in Mississippi. Under the state's constitution, both men were disenfranchised because of the convictions. They are seeking injunctive and declaratory relief under the 14th and 15th Amendments so that their voting rights can be restored. Former Democratic presidential nominee Hillary Clinton is asking a federal court to order former President Donald Trump to pay her legal fees. That stems from the lawsuit Trump filed alleging Clinton and others engaged in a conspiracy to undermine his 2016 presidential campaign with accusations of Russian collusion. Trump's suit was dismissed by a federal trial court in September, which he has appealed. In a motion filed Monday, Clinton's attorneys cast the suit as a political stunt and argued it met the threshold for the court to impose sanctions. Pennsylvania Lieutenant Governor John Fetterman warned Republican nominee Dr. Mehmet Oz is working with numerous people who he said pose a direct threat to our American democracy. Fetterman, the state's Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate, demanded Oz fire his staffers recently exposed as supporters of the January 6, 2021 insurrection. Rolling Stone reported Sunday at least 2 people working on Oz's campaign attended the rally former President Donald Trump held in Washington, D.C. on January 6, 2021. That was before thousands of Trump supporters waged an attack on the U.S. Capitol and tried to stop lawmakers from certifying the 2020 election results. Lee Snover, a campaign coordinator for Oz, was among the Trump supporters who marched to the Capitol after the Stop the Steal rally. She also participated in a Zoom call 4 days before the insurrection about the Trump campaign's plans for decertifying election results in swing states. In related news, a lieutenant general backed by the Pentagon to become a 4-star general has been passed over by the White House, the Washington Post reports. Lieutenant General Walter E. Piatt, director of the Army Staff, has been accused of lying relating to the January 6, 2021 insurrection. He was slated to move up the chain based on a Pentagon recommendation, but the White House declined to send Piatt's nomination to the Senate for months, effectively killing his chances, the report said. The Post said former Capitol Police Chief Stephen Sund accused Piatt of saying he could not recommend D.C. National Guard be deployed to help police quell the January 6 violence. Sund resigned after the attack. He also said Piatt exasperated other senior U.S. officials on a conference call by expressing concerns about how it would look if military personnel responded. A new report released Wednesday highlights the growing success of American Muslim political candidates. Authored by JETPAC, the Council on American Islamic Relations, and Empower Change, it analyzed the 2020 campaigns of Muslim American candidates. A record 181 candidates who identified as Muslims were on 2020 ballots across 28 states and Washington, D.C. 80 of them were ultimately elected. In contrast, 49 Muslim candidates were elected to public office in 2019 and 57 in 2018. The Taliban approves the restoration of a historic synagogue. Details after the break, so stay tuned. And we'll be right back after these messages.
A free 3-minute online chat can give you the personalized tips you need to start boosting your retirement savings today.
I am what hunger looks like in America.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes.
We are Justice for All. Headquartered in the heart of downtown Chicago, Justice for All is a global humanitarian initiative dedicated to raising awareness for human rights concerns impacting vulnerable minority groups. Our diverse team of staff and volunteers, led by Imam Malik Mujahid, work tirelessly to help Justice for All achieve their goals. We promote policies that protect religious freedom, address the root causes of mass displacement, and recognize the plight of refugees and forced migrants. Together, we can continue to stand up for justice. Justice for all.
What was it like when you started this network out, when you started Sound Vision those many years ago?
You know, after 9/11, one lady called me and she says, what is your channel which I can watch? And I say, I'm sorry, we don't have a channel. And you know what she said? She said, then how America will know about you?
SubhanAllah. Anything you want to say to the people who are watching? We had one sister who messaged that she grew up on Sound Vision. What do you say to the people who have been long supporters?
Thank you. Thank you. It is because of you we are able to do all of that. So the generation of Adam's world, you need to take it over for the next generation. And that's my invitation to you. To keep telling everybody where to watch. They can watch it on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, or easy thing, muslimnetwork.tv, or our YouTube channel, or our Facebook channel. And with your help, inshallah, ladies, the one who called me, what channel should I watch Muslims on? Answer is here and now.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Once home to nearly 50,000 Jews, Afghanistan's last Jewish person reportedly left the country last August, soon after the Taliban's takeover. Yet the interim Taliban administration has approved the restoration of a historic synagogue in Herat in western Afghanistan. Zalmay Safa, director of Herat's Department for the Safeguarding of Historic Monuments, said restoration of the Ua Synagogue will start in 2 months. It will take nearly 18 months to complete. Safa said there are 4 synagogues, a Turkish bath, and a cemetery in Herat. Only the Uav synagogue has so far gotten protective status. Uav has been closed to visitors for the past 2 years to avoid any damage. Tajikistan on Sunday rejected a Ukrainian blogger's claim that Iranian drones were produced in its territory and later used by Russia in Ukraine. The Tajik Foreign Ministry refuted the allegation by Ukrainian blogger Dmitry Gordon. Gordon made the comment on October 28th during an online program about the production of Iranian drones killing Ukrainians. The ministry noted it does not export military equipment to third countries. It also said Tajikistan has not received any requests from Ukraine on the issue. Western media outlets have reported Iran has agreed to supply drones and surface-to-surface missiles to Russia intended for use in the Ukraine war. U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price said Washington has abundant evidence that Russia is using Iran-made military drones to attack Ukraine. A fact-finding team in India said the Delhi Development Authority and police demolished more than 24 houses without prior notice in southwest Delhi. The homes razed Friday were in the Kharakriwara Satwari area, a predominantly Muslim locality. The demolitions occurred during Muslims' Friday congregational prayer. A group of activists visited the area and learned that the Delhi Authority carried out the demolitions by using brutal force against residents. They said Delhi police used heavy bamboo sticks, injuring several people, including women, who were also manhandled by male policemen. Residents whose homes were demolished were not given time to collect personal items. Russia's decision to pull out of a UN-brokered deal guaranteeing safe passage for ships carrying vital grain exports from Ukraine has sparked grave concerns. The move could affect global food supply at a time when the world is already facing a growing hunger crisis. Ukraine plays a key role in the global food market. The besieged nation normally supplies the world with roughly 45 million tons of grain every year, the UN reports. Ukraine ranks among the top 5 global exporters of barley, corn, and wheat. Russia's invasion of Ukraine effectively imposed a blockade on ships leaving Ukrainian ports. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization said as many as 47 million people could be pushed into acute food insecurity because of the war. Iran announced the arrest of rapper Salehi, one of the most prominent Iranian artists supporting anti-government protests. Authorities said the rapper was arrested October 30th while attempting to flee the country. Salehi's uncle denied the claim, saying his nephew was arrested in the southwestern Iranian province of Chahar Mahal Bakhtiari. Norway-based Iran Human Rights says at least 234 protesters, including 29 children, have been killed by security forces in crackdowns around Iran. Iran's leaders have portrayed the unrest as riots instigated by foreigners. More than 13,000 Iranians have also been detained thus far. A Kashmiri man set a new record by handwriting the Quran on a single sheet of paper. Mustafa ibn Jamil, a calligrapher, inked the holy book on a 500-meter-long scroll over 7 months. He used specialized pens and paper. The 27-year-old said it took months to produce a historic calligraphy. He found the special art paper at a factory in Delhi and got special calligraphy ink for the piece. Jamil finished the work last June using the Naqsh font for this project. He received recognition for the work from an independent NGO, the Lincoln Book of Records, based in Chennai. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment, so stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes.
Greetings of peace. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dawood Warnsby. About 30 years ago, I walked into a mosque for the first time here in Canada, and I felt pretty strange. The reason I felt so weird? Well, in those days, it wasn't easy to walk into a mosque and find someone else who was a shaggy-haired singer-songwriter who wrote poetry and worked professionally as a puppeteer. I had no idea how I was going to fit in culturally or creatively with this new community. I quickly realized that there was a long and rich history of arts in the Muslim community that went hand in hand with education and learning. A little while later, I came upon a magazine from an organization called Sound Vision. And they had a little blurb at the back of the magazine that said, "If you're creative, we'd love to work with you." I took some songs that I'd been writing, put them on a little cassette and called them A Whisper of Peace, sent them through to Sound Vision. I had no idea that over 25 years later, I would still be working with Sound Vision. Things have really changed over the last quarter century. Now we see tons of creative commercial Muslim artists making music and videos and film and television and comedy and cartoons. It's wonderful. But sadly, we're also still seeing a lack of educational materials for young children. Sound Vision continues to be one of the only non-profit media producers creating quality educational content for Muslim children and families. Children need mentors and teachers who are able and willing to help inspire them with wisdom, self-esteem, and care for their world. The Adam's World series has been rebooted as an app with new episodes and new songs. We have the popular Adam's World Club and the Colors of Islam classes for children and youth to attend online. And now there's a new program in the works called Falafel Dude, helping school children learn to be better citizens, better neighbors, and better Muslims. Join me in supporting Sound Vision's ongoing work however you can, so that we can continue to inspire Muslim children and families for generations to come. Assalamu alaikum.
To stop this genocide, we need your help.
Welcome back. It's time for our in-depth analysis segment. Let's watch.
Thank you, Samana. Now we move to a discussion of Israel. As many of you may know, the Israeli government is holding its fifth election in fewer years than that to try to determine who will lead the next government. Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to win back power. What are the results? What's happening there? Why has the Israeli government held so many elections? And what does this mean for the Palestinian people, for their freedom, and for their pursuit of justice? To discuss these issues and more, we're happy to welcome on our very special guest, Mr. Richard Silverstein, who many of you know is an author, journalist, and he writes for Tikkun Olam, and he's been a prominent commentator on these issues for so many years. Richard, thank you so much for joining us. How are you?
It's a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Richard, first, give us a little background for those who haven't been following Israeli politics. What has been going on there the past several years in terms of these elections happening over again, the political situation? Give us a little primer on what's been going on.
Well, this is the fifth election in 3 years, and the state of Israeli politics has really been a stalemate. They've gone back and forth between a center-right coalition, which is in power now, and a far right-wing coalition, which is the one that appears that it's won a victory in the election, as far as the exit polls show right now. It's a triumph of the far right, as I mentioned. It's a triumph of what I call Judeo-fascism, because the farthest right political parties, the ones that advocate actually not just settlement enterprise, but actually violence, outright, explicit violence against Palestinians, they've doubled their results since the most recent elections. So we're going to have not just a far-right government, but we're going to have ministers who, for the first time, they'll probably be associated with security ministries, which are the ones that govern settlements, and they govern also the way the state reacts to the Palestinians, both in the occupied territories and in Israel itself. And this really means a decline in what little rights the Palestinian minority is going to have. And it really bodes ill, I think, for democracy and for the Palestinians.
So, Richard, why have there been so many elections? It sounds like you're describing it's been election after election, a fight among people on the right. Who's going to be worse than Palestinians than the other person? Why have there been so many elections? And what role is Mr. Netanyahu played in these successive elections happening so quickly?
Well, I think there is basically a stalemate between what I call the center right, which is sort of like fascism light, if you wish, and it advocates. The only difference between far right Likud and them is that they're a little bit softer on issues of Palestinians. They're a little bit more secular in their orientation. And they're a little less militaristic, I would say, in foreign policy. But they're so close in the level of support that that's why everything is sort of like teetered towards one or the other. Really, right now, what we have is an outright decision on the part of the electorate that they're going to go farther to the right than with the center-right coalition that's in power right now. And one thing I should add is that Netanyahu represents a unique kind of politician in Israeli politics, because he doesn't have any ideological framework. He's not religious, he's secular, but he's made this alliance with the far right, with the ultra-religious, ultra-Orthodox, and he's served so far for 15 years. This will be his sixth term as prime minister. But he doesn't really represent any strong ideological base, although his alliance with the far right sort of means all of his governments are tilting in that direction. So he's a man without ideology and a man without principle, I should mention. his only principle is to preserve his own power. And in our society, democracy is an end result, is something that we're all striving for, whereas Bibi sees democracy as something that entitles him to continue his rule, his long-term rule of the country.
So that brings me to my next question. The results of this particular election, Netanyahu was tossed out of power in the last election. What do you expect to happen today? What are the exit polls showing? And if it does hypothetically turn out to be Mr. Netanyahu, who might his partners in government be? And on the flip side, if for some reason it's not him, it's Mr. Lapid or the other party, who might their partners be? And tell us about that.
Well, the exit polls, the polls prior to the election showed the far-right coalition winning 59 votes, and there's 60 in the Knesset. So anybody who wins an election has to have 61 seats. The exit polls actually are giving him 2 extra seats from the prior ones. And so he now seems to have 61 votes, and therefore he has a majority, and he's going to be forming the next government as long as the exit polls hold true. And I don't see any reason why they won't. That means that we, as I mentioned, a far-right government, but explicitly it means that Bezalel Smotrich, who is a former Jewish terrorist, and Itamar Ben-Gvir, who runs all of the Jewish terrorist operations that have happened against Palestinians in the West Bank. I shouldn't say he runs them, but he's the reputed leader of the far-right extremist factions that engage in terrorism against Palestinians. So we're going to have those 2 figures playing key roles and they're going to get ministerial posts for the first time ever in their history. So we're going to have former Jewish terrorists actually running parts of the government. And Netanyahu has really created a monster because he's the one who created the coalition that is going to get these 14 votes that's going to enable him to be in power. But the question is whether he's going to be able to exert any control over them, because they really have their own agenda, which is far more violent than Netanyahu's agenda. And they may just be, out of control once they take power. And it really bodes ill for the rule of law in Israel. And as I said, democracy is going to be totally hollowed out. Right now, Netanyahu faces a corruption trial and 4 different charges. The trial seems to have stalled. If he had been convicted, he wouldn't actually legally be allowed to be prime minister. It appears with its new majority, he'll be able to pass laws that actually end the trial and give him impunity. So Israel becomes a state that no longer has a rule of law and no longer has democracy, and in which Judeo-fascism really rules.
So what does this mean for the Palestinian people? Because it would seem they suffer no matter who is prime minister. We saw some horrific incidents occur since Netanyahu left, horrific killings of Palestinian children and other civilians. And that was happening when he was the prime minister. So, can you speak to what change there might be for the Palestinian people inside and outside of Israel's internationally recognized borders?
The irony of the current government, the center-right government, is that there have been more Palestinians killed this year than ever before since maybe the first Intifada. We'd have to go back to 1997. So 150 Palestinians have been murdered just this year by Israeli forces. So I would say if Ben-Gvir and Smotrich enter the cabinet, we're going to have a far worse situation. They will be controlling the dynamic and controlling Israeli policy in that area. So I think that it really is going to be a bad situation, both for Palestinians in the West Bank and for Palestinians in 48 Palestine. They're already, those within Israel are already discriminated against harshly in all forms of life. There's going to be motivation to either expel Palestinians from Israel, Palestine, or to make life so miserable that they'll be under the heel of the government and the right-wing government even more than they have been.
Well, another question for you, Richard. What do you think Netanyahu's return would mean for U.S.-Israel relations? Because it's no secret that the Democratic establishment, in particular the Biden administration, Obama holdovers, preferred Mr. Lapid to Netanyahu, and they seem to bend over backwards to try to give the Israeli government a lot of leeway so that Mr. Netanyahu would not return. And it appears that is going to happen anyway. So do you see any potential change in relationships there, or is this going to be business as usual?
Well, under Obama, you'll recall that the relations between Netanyahu and the U.S. government then were frigid at best. Netanyahu hated Obama, and Obama hated Netanyahu. Obama's hatred, I think, is quite justified. And we still have a Democratic president now in Joe Biden, and Biden doesn't have any better relations with Netanyahu than Obama did. So it means that we're going to have a very frosty relationship. I think the direction of U.S. policy is going to be even more hands-off than it has been under the first 2 years of Biden. So the U.S. is not going to want to be involved in any intimate way with Israel-Palestine. It's going to be turning its direction towards China and issues like that. And that bodes ill, I think, for the left-wing progressive forces in Israel, such as they are. And it means that Netanyahu has an even freer rein to impose this really repressive direction that I think he'll be taking.
I have a theory for you, Richard. I want to know what you think. So in America, we've seen this huge tug of war in recent years between establishment Democrats who are indifferent to Palestinian suffering and more liberal Democrats, especially the younger generation, who are really making a push to make concern about Palestinian human rights part of the Democratic platform. And Netanyahu's hostility to President Obama, what many would say was a racist hostility to the first black president, followed by horrific war crimes that were committed by the Israeli government on TV that people saw, really started to cause a bit of a break in the kind of Democratic establishment support for Israel. Netanyahu leaving, I think, made it easier for the Democratic establishment to come back and just kind of lockstep support whatever the Israeli government did because it didn't have him there. Do you think his return might actually make it harder for that sort of unity to be maintained? Might his return and the negative feelings about him among liberals actually make it easier for Palestinians to make their case in this country for freedom, for justice, for a change in U.S. foreign policy?
Well, there are a couple of factors, I think, trends going to be working here. Talking about the American Jewish community, of which I'm a part, profound alienation from Israel, profound alienation from this Judeo-fascist direction that it's going in. And I think if the Jewish community lessens its support for Israel, it's going to make it actually easier for the Democrats to move a little bit farther to the left. And we should mention that the Democratic position now isn't that progressive on Israel and Palestine. But I think it will incrementally be able to move in a farther left direction. You're going to have Bernie Sanders, Rashida Tlaib, and people like that, Ilhan Omar, are going to be able, I think, to take a slightly more left-wing progressive position on these issues because they're not going to get as much pushback from most of the American Jewish community. That doesn't mean that the leadership of the Israel lobby is going to fall into the background at all. But if anything, they'll be reinforcing their attempts to maintain the status quo and keep attacking pro-Palestine candidates, as AIPAC has been doing with the tens of millions they've been funneling into congressional races and senatorial races. But I think the momentum is moving away from Israel overall in American politics. And I don't think it's going to be a revolutionary change or a radical overnight change, but I think it's going to be moving in that direction over time.
Well, Richard, obviously the election results there are coming in. A lot of people watching them here and in the region. We thank you for joining us to share some of your perspective and thoughts, and we look forward to having you back to discuss more about this ongoing issue, which is relevant not only to our country, not only to the Israeli public, obviously to the Palestinian people as well. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us.
Thanks. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you. And we'll send it back to you, Samana.
Thank you. That's all from our Chicago studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on our YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Salam and good night.